Hart went to the woodshed. He studied and toured and worked hard and got better. He started booking bigger and bigger comedy shows. He built a fan base. Indeed, he did, and did a couple of stand-up comedy specials, all under the traditional rules where someone else owned all the rights, I am sure. And I'd be very curious to see who made most of the profits off of those specials. I can hazard a guess. Is it that magical manager who just plucked him out of obscurity in Philly? Who bought, an $8-9 million mansion in the Pacific Palisades? And is married to a former comedy talent manager with the middle name Sorkin? So interesting. Right? So he's paying into this system, doing comedy specials under the traditional rules where someone else owned all the rights and profited most of the money. The turning point came one night back in 2007 when Hart walked out on stage and saw the room wasn't full. He'd been paid a nice fee as always, but this time something nagged him. The comedians go in and they get the money and go on the show, he says. Maybe it's full or maybe not. The big thing is we got the money. For Hart, that mentality was self-defeating over the long term. I thought, how am I ever going to grow as a talent if every show I go to isn't full? How's my fan base going to grow? I thought, I'm not doing this. So he started talking directly to comedy club owners, asking questions about business models. He found out that many were papering the room, giving away tickets to generate an audience, and then making all their money on food and drinks. Hart didn't mind that. If he killed, those were new fans after all. But what he wanted was a way to build an audience that could grow with me as I grew, says Hart. He looked around to see who was doing it already. In this case, that was comedian Dane Cook, who at the time was one of the biggest comedians in America. He had a cult audience, says Hart. He had so many colleges he performed at, it was ridiculous, and he had his fans' info. Dane Cook could reach out. This was way before social media was ubiquitous. If you wanted to connect with a fan, you had to get their email address. So Hart did. After each show, he'd ask people for their email addresses and give them a flyer with his photo, a tagline from the show, and more info about him. Something to stay in their heads and be remembered for when I came back, he says. He'd also drive them to the then mighty MySpace, which allowed him to target messages geographically to let local fans know about his upcoming shows. Oh, so social media marketing. Email funnel. Marketing. Okay, it worked. In the second year of his marketing push, he started seeing larger crowds at his shows in the cities he'd canvassed during his tour the prior year. He saw repeat fans. People started talking, telling him they loved his stuff. Crowds got bigger. More important, the fans were buying tickets in advance from the clubs, which boosted club revenue and allowed Hart to demand more money when he came back. Your demand can be higher because now you're selling physical tickets, not just food and alcohol, says Hart. Everybody won. It's rare for an entertainer to bet this heavily on himself, but comedians aren't like other entertainers. They are, in some ways, smarter. They write all their own stuff, do they? Because that's specifically what the critique is, that Torrey Hart wrote a lot of the initial material from Philly, and I guess while they were still married for 7 or 8 years. And then, right, much like Matt Rife, if what people are saying about Torrey writing for Kevin is true, then there was a whole room full of dudes. He wanted dude validation and dude writers writing dude jokes. And, I'm not saying, Kevin doesn't write his own material, but certainly he has lots of friends who are employed as writers, whether they actually do the writing that their job titles and salaries suggest is, well, I'll let you draw your own conclusions. It's rare for an entertainer to bet this heavily on himself, but comedians aren't like other entertainers. They are in some ways smarter. They write all their own stuff. They can read a room. They are keen observers of the human condition. They must have impeccable timing. They must sell themselves for every minute they're on stage. They have to learn to deal with a form of rejection that would wither other types of performers, or just about any human being, and they know how to listen. These qualities, of course, are all rocket fuel for entrepreneurs. That's why, increasingly, comedians like Hart, Adam Sandler, Will Ferrell, and Tom Segura, who are also founders, starting their own production companies so they can assert control over their names, produce their own specials, tours, and other products, and retain all the rights to what they make. It's so interesting, the names that get mentioned in these articles, right? Who's that Indian guy who was big on Netflix early on? Russell something. I forget his name, but I have been to his Malibu mansion. And oh, baby, whatever the, I don't know what it is. Is it tour money? Is it production company money? The money is the most real money I have ever personally seen and experienced in my life. Like, apparently lives down the block from Dr. Dre. Like, significant money. And, you know, I feel like Calabasas money isn't quite the same kind of money. You know, Encino money isn't quite the same kind of money. And it's like all those articles from Forbes in particular saying, oh, Kylie's a billionaire. You know, Kanye's a billionaire. Are they really? Because I feel like the people specifically here, the comedians who don't get named as being business people, are not the people that I've seen in real life have it like that. In any case, the big difference is, unlike those performers, that's why increasingly comedians like Hart, Adam Sandler, Will Ferrell, and Tom Segura are also founders, starting their own production companies so they can assert control over their names, produce their own specials, tours, and other products, and retain all the rights to what they make. The big difference is, unlike those performers, Hart took the risk before he had a lot of fame or a following. That's not to say he was unknown. He'd had success on the road, and his specials, Grown Little Man and Seriously Funny, had done well on Comedy Central. But he knew the end game long before he was fully ready to play it. Did he? Or was that his manager who grabbed him from the comedy club in Philly? I was a snap your fingers famous guy, says Hart. You know, snaps his fingers, nobody can think of your name. What did he do? He didn't think he was ready to start producing his own specials yet. I said, it's not time. So patience was the first thing. After taping Seriously Funny, he started touring with new material. Ooh, I'd love a time marker of when he was married and with Tori Hart. I want to say they split up in 2009, 2010, but I'm not sure. After taping Seriously Funny, he started touring with new material. His audience's reactions were big enough that he decided the stand-up special could be a huge hit. That was the moment he decided to try doing it himself. In 2009, he created Heartbeat Productions, rented the Ventura office space, and invested the money he was making on that tour into producing a special himself, named Laugh at My Pain. He would own it outright, retaining all the rights. It cost him $700,000. Now he needed to get people to pay to see it. Hart's producing partner on the special was a guy named Jeff Clanagan, a longtime Hollywood producer whose Code Black Enterprises became a division of Lionsgate. Clanagan says the pair intended to get the special released in movie theaters because it had a theatrical quality to it. That was easier said than done. We took the film and shopped it to all the studios, says Clanagan, and everybody passed on it. So they regrouped. They figured they made the film themselves, so why not distribute it themselves?